Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Dukes, and I oversee our professional development program at the Stepping Stones Group, and I am also on our new teletherapy team. So welcome to our Foundations of Distance Learning presentation. In the past couple weeks, as you know, we have all had to jump into the teleworld with both feet and blindfolded with very little preparation or prior knowledge possibly. To better help support you, the Stepping Stones Group has created a task team of sorts with members from our clinical management team. We have SLP, OT, school psych, and nursing represented, and we are doing our best to fill in the blanks around those disciplines. While we've provided training opportunities for teletherapy specifically, we saw the need to pull back the lens a bit and provide some information on distance learning from a broader perspective. A few members of our task team graciously offered to provide this additional training. So on our training today, we have Jim Davis and Jenny Wynn, who are two OTs and clinical managers. And we also have Nicole Corin and Kara Moore, who are two SLPs and clinical managers. We will go through the presentation on the first half, but then we want to hear from you. So we will move into the discussion portion of the presentation for the second half. So please feel free to add your questions to the chat box throughout the presentation so that we can open it up for discussion at the end. So let's get started. Jim?
Thank you very much, Christine. All right, everyone, welcome to our webinar today. My name is Jim Davis. I'm going to be your first presenter, and we're going to be talking about foundations of distance learning. First, let's cover our objectives. We want to learn how to manage personal and professional expectations during this transition. We want to identify different levels of distance learning, to establish strategies regarding your new service delivery methods, your routines, and your personal working space, and to understand the need to establish mental wellness and coping strategies for ourselves. All right, let's talk a little bit about managing expectations. First of all, flexibility and patience. We really need to have those. A few things to keep in mind. Everyone is adapting to this new normal we have right now. These are unprecedented times, as I'm sure you've heard many times over. As Yoda says, you must unlearn what you've learned, or at least change the way you think about what you've learned and how you can apply that to how we're going to be delivering services now. You can't do everything on your own, and you can't solve all the challenges that you're going to experience, except that you'll have obstacles that you'll need to overcome. We'll all be doing this in our lives, our work, how we deliver services, pretty much everything. Understand you'll need to develop, or you will develop, new skill sets as you go along. This is going to help you in the long run. This is going to make you better as a clinician. Ultimately, have patience with the process and with yourself. Accept that you can't change everything, that you don't have all the answers, but you, everyone else, we're all figuring this out as we go. So we will figure these things out. It just is going to take a little bit of time. All right. Here's a couple of examples how people's lives have changed. First, this is Maya. Maya's a mom. She works at home now because of the COVID-19 situation. Maya has 3 kids. Her husband is a nurse, and he's working in the healthcare industry. So you can imagine there are a lot of changes in her life, and there are a lot of challenges that she's dealing with, and I'm sure a lot of stress related to her husband's work. Another example, here's Dan. Dan's an OT. All right, he works in schools, and he has 58 students in 4 different school sites he works with. His district is trying to keep everything as standardized across the board as possible, but as things change, he's having to adapt to those changes, and so is the district. He's never worked from home before on distance learning, so this is a new thing for him. And he has a child, and he's got a wife at home who has he's going to have a baby. She's pregnant, so she has a lot. They have a lot going on, and you can understand this is just a couple of different scenarios for people, so you can kind of get some perspective that everybody is working through these challenging times, okay? All right, let's talk a little bit about school site versus distance learning. In the school site environment, you have more control, all right? You're able to provide services, and you're able to drive your services while you're working. You're able to control what goes on with your students and whatnot. Your IP goals are addressed directly at school. You use typical site-based service delivery methods such as push-in, pull-out, collaboration, small group, consultation on site. You do your assessments on site, and you have all the resources to do that. You can attend IEP meetings on site with your team members and family. You do a lot of collaboration in the classroom, hopefully, and you also are able to provide education for teachers and other staff members. And then finally, you have access to all the materials at school that you would use for your job, all right? From a distance learning perspective, in the environment, you have less control, and it takes more patience, creativity, and flexibility. And you've got to try as much as possible to structure that may not always be easy. IEP goals can still be addressed, but now IEP goals and service delivery, which is our next bullet point, need to be addressed from a distance learning perspective. Helping families, helping teachers, working with the team to really make sure that those goals are being addressed and those services are being delivered at home appropriately as much as possible. Assessments, this is a situation where it's really determined by your district. You want to follow district protocol on this. Some districts are doing assessments and some districts are opting not to do assessments. So again, how that's done and which districts will do that is really determined on a case-by-case basis, district by district. And refer to your district policies on that and whatever information you have coming from your school districts. IEP meetings can still be held. IEP meetings can be held on Zoom, Google Meet, or by phone even. So team members can still get together. Fortunately, we have platforms such as the one we're on now to where we can do things like that and bring everybody together. On-site collaboration at school or in the classroom. However, now we're in people's homes on one level or another. We really have to rely on collaboration and consultation with staff and parents to collaborate. And then finally, something to think about is access to materials and supplies. As we mentioned at school, you have all those things readily available for you to use. However, at home, families may not have all those resources available, and this is one of the things that we're going to have to kind of understand and adapt to. What that means is that sometimes we may provide services for a family, or we may want to do something for a family, but if they have limitations, say in technology, supplies, or materials, then we may have to alter our services. We may have to be creative and be flexible. And we'll have to be patient with that process. It will be a challenge, but again, we can overcome these. We will work through this. All right. Now I'm going to pass this on now to Nicole, who's going to continue our presentation.
All right. So I wanted to discuss all the different types of things that I know that we're doing here. And we're using this umbrella term of distance learning to cover all those types of supports. So what I really want to drive home first is that while interpreting this visual, it's really, really important to look at it while keeping your district's current procedures in mind. So not every single thing that you see here is something that you have been asked or expected to do. Some districts have been very specific regarding how our supports will be delivered, while others have not and have been kind of loose about what they expect us to do. So by this point, I imagine you all know where your district kind of falls on that spectrum, depending on the types of communications that you have been receiving directly from your district. So the different levels of support that we can provide depend on mostly the level of tech that we have available, either to us or to our families. So if you look all the way to the left, we start with some very basic technology and we move down the line to the higher technology. Starting with the basic tech, we can provide a lot of different indirect services. So these are the ongoing supports provided directly to caregivers and to school staff as more individualized touch points. So it's not a call one time and I'm all done, but it's more of you're kind of keeping this ongoing communication, whether it's a phone call or an email. So all of those types of things, packets and resources for your parents, traditional mail. I know some districts are utilizing that. Some districts also have some school sites that are still open that students can access. They're picking up their laptops, or they can get meals. It's possible that you can leave off some materials there. Resources, again, for your teachers, teacher consult, emails, phone calls. Again, all of those kinds of things are types of supports that fall under that basic tech category. Let's see. So moving on to the more moderate tech, excuse me, which is a little bit more involved. We're now incorporating the use of different collaborative e-learning or online learning platforms to provide those resources and supports. So if you think of Google Classroom or Seesaw as an actual virtual classroom, you can set up your own personal therapy room for each of your students on your caseload, or you can even be part of the full classes that are already set up so that you can sort of provide that, that push-in support. So the ways to support your students in this category are very, very similar to the basic tech suggestions. The only difference between them now is that those supports are fully integrated into a more structured, more collaborative program. And then the most involved form of providing distance learning support is that direct service or teletherapy model, which I think when all of this started, all of our brains immediately went to, this is what it is. This is how I have to do it. This is what it is. I have to figure this all out. But now that we have the time to kind of take a step back and think about all the ways that we really can provide distance learning supports, this is only one portion of it. And again, I know there are a lot of districts that are requiring it. Some are saying, sure, if you can figure it out, sounds great. Others are not as into this type of support. So this is the most similar format to a therapy session before our lives were flipped upside down, and a lot of factors definitely go into making this type of support happen, which we will talk about shortly. So access to the platform, cameras, microphones, sharing a language with the facilitators is always helpful, but there's a whole lot more that's involved with this type of support. Okay. And all of that being said, we do have to remember that we still have those same responsibilities we had before. So this here is another list that needs to be read while keeping your district's policies and procedures in mind. Many districts haven't begun holding teleconference IEPs yet, while others started weeks ago. This is all here just to serve as a reminder that if there is a protocol in place for all of these different responsibilities, we have to follow it. I know there's been a lot of changes and a lot of adjustments to what our daily responsibilities look like at work, but we do have to remember to keep on top of these types of things. So don't let yourself feel too far removed from your session notes and your treatment logs and all of those other things. We're still responsible for maintaining that accountability and showing our districts that we're working. And we're working really hard. So we want to make sure that all of our paperwork and documentation is there to show it. All right, so we're going to move on to Kara, who's going to start talking about our environment.
Hello, everybody. It's kind of ironic that I'm talking about your environment and setting up your space, because I have moved to my cell phone because I'm having so many problems with my computer. So don't be like Kara. I'm finding it would be a very good idea to have a plug that goes directly into my router to get my Wi-Fi instead of going on wireless at a time of day that it is very, very busy. So anyway, there are so many opportunities for learning out there right now, and especially through the Bridge Academy, that give you detailed instructions on setting up. So I'm just going to briefly talk about some key points to consider when you're doing live therapy, live teletherapy, which are lighting, audio, visual quality. You want to make sure your background when you're setting up your video, it's not too distracting. You want to make sure you try a couple types of audio. I've tried wireless headphones. I've tried, calling in from a phone, but being on a computer. I've tried my computer speakers. To be honest with you, I have done teletherapy previously full-time for 2 years, and I had a fabulous headset with a boom mic that worked the best, but I'm having a really hard time getting one right now because I think everyone is finding that that's a quality piece of equipment. So yes, so play with it, try different things. Try different angles where you're setting your camera. If you have the ability to get an extra camera, try, there's a bunch of different kinds of cameras out there. I'm looking into actually getting a document camera where it can look down on my hands and I can do an activity or something, and the computer can pick that up. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the possibilities are endless, and you don't have to know everything all at once. This is such a learning curve, and you're learning day by day, minute by minute. So just breathe and know that that you're learning a lot of skills right now. Also, a recommendation that I've heard is to set up files on your desktop, maybe by student or group, or by what you're treating, so that when you're ready to have a session, you don't have to go gathering everything around. Again, you can prepare for it, have it already saved in the file folder for that particular student. So it's a lot easier just to click on that file, then enter your meeting, and then you can, have easy access to go between materials. And again, I highly recommend practicing on whatever platform you're using. Make sure you know how to send an invitation. Make sure you can navigate. My grandson has been fabulous because I have been practicing on him. So that's been very helpful. But play with it. All of your clinical managers, I'm sure, would help you as well. If you have specific things you want to play with, you can use them as guinea pigs. And you also want to limit the amount of clutter that is around you. It can get very overwhelming, very distracting. I do think it's a great idea to have little toys on the desk. So if you are working with a difficult child and you lose their attention, you can, drop the paper, and not necessarily paper and pencil, but the structured activity, and just go to play, because we all know how to use play to hit our goals. So flexibility is the key. All right, can we go to the next slide? I don't have control of that. Can somebody help me out? Thank you. All right, so the other part of getting set up, getting ready, is teamwork. Okay, so your team in this situation is the teachers, but more importantly, it is the parent or caregiver. That is your teammate in this. And you're going to have, a heart-to-heart with them as to what each of the different models are that Nicole went over, and what are your options? What can therapy look like? This is a perfect time to individually design treatment sessions based on a child's need, a parent or caregiver's ability to help. This is a great opportunity to teach parents and caregivers how to play with their kid, how to have a conversation, how to interact. And so I guess what I'm running out of time, but what I really want you to know in this is use this as an opportunity. And it doesn't have to be, there's no one formula. It is what works for you and the family and the student. And it's, also dependent on what your district is mandating. I understand that. But be flexible. You need to know what the parents are willing to do. You don't want to ask them to do too much. And, depending, I'm going over to the next slide. I'm sorry. And along the way, you're going to have bumps. Okay. There's going to be problems. You're going to have a family that is having Wi-Fi instability or doesn't have Wi-Fi, doesn't have any access. So again, going back to that umbrella slide, there are things we can do for no tech, right? It's a great time to say, okay, well, what does your day look like, parent, caregiver? What are you doing throughout the day? And then thinking about that. Oh, well, we make breakfast together. Okay, great. If the child, involve the child more in that, or maybe they can set the table, or maybe they can, and whatever they're doing, like, if they go for a walk. Okay, well, when you go for a walk, maybe talk about the things that you're seeing. Take an opportunity to increase vocab. So whatever the level of the child is, and what the parents have available, maybe they don't have toys, maybe they don't have games. So you can get creative and think about items around the house and how to turn that into a functional activity. And to be honest, if that's their situation, they're probably some of the people that are feeling more overwhelmed than anyone. So they may just need a conversation with you. They may need you to tell them it's okay, you're doing the best you can. It's about maintaining that contact with that family and being that support. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jenny.
Okay, thank you, Kara. So as we're going through all of this, right, and realizing that, what our new normal now is, we have there's a lot to deal with, right? And so our coping skills and our mental health are very, 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 very important. I know we all want to do the best that we can for our students, but we also have to make sure we fill our cup first, right? And in doing so, some things that have found that are beneficial, or definitely create some daily routines. Working from home is new for a lot of you, and what does that look like? Does it look, I'm sure one day you tried working the whole day in your pajamas, and that's been great. But then another day you wake up and actually take a shower and are like, okay, no, I'm going to go, like I'm quote going to work, and going into the office and or your desk and trying to get stuff done. So whatever helps you feel more productive, helps you create some kind of routine. We know for our kids, routines are beneficial. We're no different. It's helpful to know, okay, I'm going to do that, tackle this stuff first, do this next, and to help us get through the day. But with that also being said, our work and home environment have now blurred, and I think it can become a little bit harder to create boundaries, working until, late at night, or, we had a conversation the other day with a therapist that, a teacher was calling her at 9 p.m. and wanting to talk about an activity because she just wanted to get it done, like, no, guys, don't do anything at 9 p.m. Take some time for yourself, set up your boundaries, set up what you need to know, make sure everybody knows about it. Yes, it might not be your typical 8 to 4 schedule that you're used to, but do your best to kind of to work with something, and obviously be flexible, as well, but create those boundaries for yourself. Make sure you're getting up and even taking a break, going for a walk or walking around the house a little bit, in between, Zoom meetings that you have, and to really be able to get away, and to have a little bit of a mental break. The other piece is also your work environment, a little bit about like what Kara said. I'm going to take a little bit of the OT stance and like remember that, make sure your computer is, like our 90 degrees type of setup, right? We don't want, it's harder sometimes. Like I love being able to work with my laptop on my lap, but that's not a very conducive thing to do when you're working from home and doing it for hours on end. So make sure you're in good position, because it's just going to kind of impact your body and your overall well-being. And the other part is really practice gratitude. I know it might sound cheesy, but I mean, it really is true. Like focus on what went well today, right? We know that there's going to probably be some chaos in your day, but I'm sure something went well, or it went better than it did yesterday. And, think about those positive victories that you have, and just build on it and be like, okay, cool. That was great. This was, might be a small little victory, but it's still a good victory for today, and we'll build on it tomorrow. And then next, we have remember to reach out for support. Again, like your clinical managers here through SSG, we are here for you. Call us, text us, we'll, email us. Let us connect and let us help you. You're not in this alone at all. And obviously your family, your friends, and other support people that you have within your little, your bubble of people, reach out to them too. Everybody I hear now doing these virtual social happy hours, or trying to connect with people using FaceTime or Zoom or other things to connect a little bit more. Like make sure you do that too, because you have to fill up, like we said, fill up that personal kind of fun social cup too. And then the fun part is remembering about some of our vices, right? Like coffee, woo, like we know that we use a lot of, as well, I would say as an OT, we talk a lot about coping skills and a lot about self-regulation for our kids. You can go to the next slide, Nicole. And doing that, and remember that's us too. Like, yes, coffee might be something like, okay, I might be drinking a lot more of it now because I'm at home and I have access to my coffee maker, and I'm, doing it in the afternoon and in the morning, and, or you're coming home and you're having a glass of wine at night, or whatever it is, or ice cream. Like, remember, okay, that's fine, but also what else can we do to help us feel maybe like less overwhelmed? A lot of people, we always recommend, exercise is really important. Taking up some of those hobbies. I love my coloring books, although I don't get a chance to do them as much as I do. I would like to, but, puzzles have become really popular, to be able to say, okay, you know what, even maybe it's taking a little break in the middle of your day to go and work on a puzzle for 15 minutes, and then you come back and, refresh, your brain gets to reset, and then you start going again. I know in talking to Nicole actually earlier when we were talking about this presentation today, she has this cool little jar of putty, that TheraPutty that she uses, and she just loves to squeeze it when she's on calls and doing things. And so, so that helps her. Yeah, there's thanks for sharing, Nicole. Sorry to out you on that, but it's a great example, right? It's just, what do we need to help get us? Our kids need it, right? So what else do we have to take that moment to say, well, how does that apply to us? And we're no different. We have to be able to, find those coping strategies, some that are probably a little bit more healthier for us, and being mindful, and, yoga and meditation, if you will. And then, like we said, sometimes it's other, maybe, those few and far between coping skills of your, pint of ice cream and your glass of wine. Or maybe they are a little bit more frequent. We'll see. I won't tell. But just whatever, just know that what works for you. And then, let's see. In talking a little bit about resources, know that some of this, again, is a little bit common sense, and we've repeated it before, but really get to know what resources you have through your district. especially their district trainings. I know a lot of districts are doing their own, like Google Drives with resources and things there. Like you have to get to know, if we're working in this classroom now of Google Classrooms or Seesaw, you have to learn that classroom. Like OT's best practice, we're pushing in, how can you help support that classroom if we don't know what that looks like yet, right? Big plug for Bridge Academy. Please, use Bridge Academy as a resource. We have a ton of webinars on there. We have a huge, like Christina mentioned earlier, a drive of resources that you can use as well that are specific for this kind of distance learning and teletherapy. So use that, and we're constantly trying to build that out. And then just another reminder too, this Tuesday, we also do have a webinar doing from trash to treasure. So taking those things that are kind of common or around the house, and how can we use them in therapy? And I think that's a huge piece to I believe like what Nicole had said, really we don't need to say, oh darn, they don't have, these fancy, therapy tool that I usually like to use. Let me use what they have access to at home. Which kind of goes into the focusing the treatment interventions. I've had multiple conversations with multiple therapists, this past month, if you will, and everybody wants to get intervention resources, right? Again, going back to my piece, like, well, how do you know what's appropriate if we don't know what they have in their at home, or what's in the classroom, what's happening, what is the teacher doing? So let's get to know what supplies you have access to, get to know what kind of framework you're working in first before you start to jump in, because then it gets really, I'm sure you guys all have done it. You've done all this research and have all these tools, and you're like, but now what? How do I use this? This is very overwhelming. And then just quickly to kind of reiterate the point again that we've been making, just make sure to go to your district for specific questions. Like I already saw somebody mention something about documentation in terms of asking a question. Like those things really should be to your district. They all have specific policies and procedures regarding their documentation and IEPs and all of that stuff. And so you really want to direct it to those people that, in the district that you're working with. And then here are just a couple of quick resources. I want to make sure, I don't want to go through these a whole lot, but because I want to make sure we have time for your questions. But know that there's lots of websites. These tend to have a lot more content. Is not just one thing, so to speak. So these resources are kind of, I don't want to say all encompassing, but definitely have a broad variety of things to kind of choose from at their sites. And then a lot of people, including myself, have felt that, or found that Facebook groups have been really helpful. You can ask a question instantly in there. All the other you could probably just do a search in some of the OT groups, at least that I've been in, to see what the resources already people have been sharing. So definitely don't forget about those as well. And then I think, Nicole, we're going to move into questions. So we know you guys all have a ton of questions. So please, 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 we'd love to hear from you. If you don't mind, I think you can see down there at the bottom, you might have to move your cursor depending on if you can see it or not, but there's a section for Q&A. If you want to type in your question there, we'll be more than happy to answer it. And then if you also feel brave, you can also, raise your hand. And if your question might be a little bit more complicated, we can probably unmute you and have a discussion. So let's see.
Well, I want to address the documentation piece quickly about the question. Like you said, Jenny, even though there are tons and tons of emails flying all over the place, there is information in the communication, at least I know from LAUSD specifically, because I know that's where you are in Kita, where we have been instructed on how to do this. And of course, it's not going to reflect our typical progress notes where Jill is producing post-vocalic R with 82% accuracy, 4 out of 5 trials, because we're not going to get that type of information from our parents. So they are going to look different, but it is in the information that we have been getting.
Okay. And just in the end too, like somebody else had mentioned, there a question regarding documenting teacher support for the basic tech piece. And I think, you know, whatever, again, kind of going back to your district, whatever, you know, mode or however they want you to do your documentation. Like I know for us, we use a program called Paradigm or SHN. And then so we're supposed to, you know, document that under consult and just, you know, if maybe how the teacher is responding to that support. You know, some of our teachers can be collaborative, some maybe not so much. And you know, it is good to, you know, to note that. And even with our parents, definitely document. You're trying to reach out, nobody answers, nobody, you know, like, okay, like you're doing your best effort. Somebody had mentioned to me in terms of looking at this situation that we're in, kind of from an ethical standpoint versus like true like compliance, right? Are we really doing, we're kind of like in this triage situation. Are we really doing everything that's possible that we can for this student? And I think if we show that it's good faith and we show we're making the effort, that is half the battle right there. So, let's see, Nicole.
Robin, let's see. Robin would like to know about trainings available specifically for school psychologists, specifically testing admin. Do you mean in a teletherapy sense or in a more general sense?
Yeah, because I think while we're waiting for her to kind of chime in about it, I know that there's been a lot of controversy among school psychologists and tests being valid or not valid. And I would say this even is probably within speech and OT and the other disciplines as well. Like what is valid between you know, in that virtual teletherapy kind of session and what's not. You know, and what is kind of ethical. Some people are saying, well, I know that these, like somebody mentioned, I believe is the Peabody for us OTs and the bot, like it's not there, it's not standardized or the results you can't use virtually. Like you can't do that and they're not standardized for being administered that way. And some people were saying, oh, well, I'm going to go ahead and administer that. And I'm just going to say, well, you know, I did it, but it was due to, you know, I had to do it under these circumstances. And if that's how your district chooses for you to provide that way, to do it that way, that's fine. I guess, at least from an OT standpoint, I would say, what else could I do functionally that I don't necessarily have to do the standardized test for to still get the same information, right? And I think there's a lot of ways, even from all disciplines, maybe not quite school psych, because I know you guys have a lot of really true standardized things, but that you have to abide by. But I know we can functionally get that information usually from other places. So, and then let's see.
Jenny, I think I'm just going to address some tech questions really quickly that I saw come in.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, this is Brittany. I help run or upload content to the Bridge Academy. We had a question regarding, you know, what's the difference between Google Hangouts and Google Meet? They essentially are both video conferencing tools, but Google Meet is the G Suite version, meaning it's for the paid license that you might be getting through us or a school. You know, that doesn't necessarily mean everyone does, but Google Meet has a little bit more security features, and it's going to be the platform that if you're going through the Stepping Stones group, we are providing that, and you can also schedule directly from your calendar. To see what that kind of looks like, I would recommend checking out our YouTube channel. We do have some basic info videos on there. And then pivoting to Zoom, I know we've had some questions about Zoom bombing and Zoom hacking lately. I was just sent an updated security feature that Zoom has pushed out. You'll notice that you will have a security shield on your toolbar if you're doing a meeting. I highly recommend locking that meeting after all the participants have joined, so no one else can enter that. An additional security measure would be to add a password to your meetings. And I think somebody was saying, who do we report the hack to? I would assume that would be to Zoom directly, but if it is during a session, I would imagine maybe to your clinical manager. I'll revert back to the clinical team on that if there's like an issue in a session. Let's see. I think those are the only tech pieces I could help with at this time.
Okay.
And about this recording and the PowerPoint, we can upload this to Bridge Academy too.
Sorry.
And then I know somebody mentioned about group therapy through Zoom or a video call. I think that's definitely a district question. There's some districts that are fine. They have a kind of like disclosure because they know that they're going to be doing teletherapy or doing that as a primary mode of service for their therapist, and they know they want to do groups. So they've already created a template type of consent form from the district that says basically if you're agreeing to participate in teletherapy, you're also agreeing to that in knowing that your child is going to possibly be in another quote classroom with another student. So it definitely can be a privacy issue for sure, but I definitely direct that to your district and how they're proceeding with that for sure. So.
And hi, this is Christine. I just wanted to jump in. I know that Robin had a question about school psych, and I just wanted to let her know that Brittany Zayer has offered to reach out to her directly and will speak to her about some specific ideas. And in the meantime, we are continuing to build our resources on Bridge Academy. So if you were to go to Bridge Academy, click on the resources button, we have a teletherapy toolkit that will take you to just dozens and dozens of resources, and we are actively adding new resources there every day. And I know that Brittany has added some school psych ones specifically just this week, so definitely check that out.
And then,
hi, this is Jim. Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Jim.
I greatly apologize for earlier. I had no idea that this thing was acting the way it had been, and I was having problems logging in, so that was my fault. I apologize for that. I just wanted to let everybody know that, but I'm available for questions.
Okay. I would say, Kara, I don't know, I see that there's a question here about screen sharing, and kind of like as an OT, she, is kind of working on using a mouse with some of the students because they definitely have some difficulty with hand-eye coordination and moving their mouse accurately. Are you aware? I would say I'm not, but Kara, are you aware of any kind of different screen sharing to where you're able to actually see the student's screen?
That is a great question. You do have the ability in some platforms to hook to an iPad or an iPhone so that you can have two views. That's getting a little detailed. Most of the time, there's going to be a parent or caregiver there as well to help with accessibility. I would need, to know specific platform. That's hard to answer.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was thinking too, in that sense of them kind of going back to the district and asking that, like, what is the capabilities within the platform that they're using?
Right.
Because if they're doing it, I'm sure M. Brown Jones, who is asking the question, if you're having that same question, I'm sure there's other OTs in your district that are probably inquiring the same things. So definitely check in the platform and probably even your device that you're using to see if that even has the capability. So I'm sure. Yeah, and somebody
Okay, one of the questions that I see is that they're having a big challenge scheduling their caseload during the week. Are there any suggestions on how to attack that?
Do you mean scheduling specific teletherapy sessions?
I think that's what,
Yes,
yeah.
Okay.
that's how I'm interpreting it. Yes.
Okay.
Because she's also saying too, or the anonymous attendee is also saying that, like, you know, there's a language barrier with some of them, and then also trying to call and people don't answer, or maybe don't have the technology at home. So, any suggestions?
Yeah. When it comes to the language barrier, I find that a lot of districts, particularly the larger ones, don't really have an answer right now. It's just the reality. I haven't heard of any incredible system that's gone into place anywhere, but the fact that we are just trying, we've called, we've asked if there is someone who can translate. I know some therapists and providers were provided by a little script to use, and if they got an answer that basically said, no, there's nobody here that speaks English, then you document you tried, but there's only so much that we can do until we get further support from them.
You know, in my district, they're using the paraprofessionals, and the pairs that work with the English language learners to make those calls for us and to help us facilitate. But so that's another great question to ask your district. You know, what resources are in place for that? And you can also reach out to the classroom teacher and say, how are you getting information to them? To see if maybe there's someone that's serving as the interpreter within that family. If there's somebody you should be dealing with, you know, that can provide that information to that family.
Yeah, and I think too, like as Nicole had mentioned, like we also, I know you guys have heard this a ton of times and we've said it, like just know that everything is always constantly evolving, you know, and so like right now they're just trying to get everything up and running, and then they're figuring out, oh, these are the barriers to some of these things that are happening, and what are we going to do, and then they're trying to problem solve kind of on the fly. And so definitely bring those questions up to your administration or your contact people that are there, and then make sure to you know, so that then they know that that's an issue within that you guys are dealing with, and they can address it from a district standpoint. And then just being flexible and be like, okay, that's all I can do. It's all right. Like, don't stress out. it's okay. You know?
I'm seeing a lot of questions about how to code and bill. And, you know, I'm in Florida, and just today we got some direction. So the states are still trying to find out how to proceed. So that's all going to come from your district as far as how they want you to code the sessions, what they want you to put as billable versus non-billable, whether group therapy is billable or not. There's a bunch of things that are just now being made clear, and they do change every day as well. So look to your districts for direction on those specifics. Trying to see what else is.
Yeah. There's a good question there, and especially from the speech path side, if you know, Kara, Nicole, you mentioned something about, you know, especially doing group sessions, like trying to work on those social skills. And so you need two people,
right,
you know, to kind of work together with. Do you have any suggestions with that in terms of, you know, siblings or parents, or what if, you know, what if it is only a parent that is there?
I think you can definitely use a parent as a facilitator to work on those things. The directive we got today was that group sessions were not billable. So even though it's better for the student, as far as Medicaid goes, but that, like I said, that's just Florida. That I'm not speaking to anything else, and they may change their mind. So you may, your district may tell you, oh, well, you're going to do individual or, and if that happens, you can absolutely use the parent as kind of the communication partner and kind of lead the discussion. For example, I have life skills high school students, so we work on this a lot. And I'll ask one of them, I'll say, Joe, what is Jim's favorite color? And he'll say purple. And I'll say, oh, you know that? Did you ask him that? And he'll say no. And I'll say, well, then you don't know, you need to ask him. So it's kind of, so then they kind of pick up on the fact that, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to have to ask a question. So you can easily use the parent. And I've done that before too. What's your mom's favorite food? Well, sometimes they know that, but, ask something that there's no way they could know to teach them. So parents can be used, I guess, is the long and short answer of that.
And I think too, I'm even thinking from like an OT side of it, like, or even from this sense of not doing like that is kind of a little bit more teletherapy piece that like knowing even within the digital classroom, can we start like probe them to ask questions of the peers in the classroom? Can they post something in that digital classroom that maybe will start something, kind of like a little Facebook post that kind of goes down and everybody's replying to each other and seeing what that kind of looks like, and even just consulting with your parents and the teachers, especially parents, of just like, how do we better facilitate that at home? How do we build that engagement at home? It doesn't, we have to think sometimes outside the box for those supports, because you're right, like we're not in our nice little room if you're, a speech, if you're doing your own little thing, like, or having a classroom that is a lot more interactive, we might not be able to do that. I will say I do know some classrooms that are doing kind of like a live small group from the teacher, like she's doing instruction in a small group, and so a couple of kids are being in the same group at a time, and you might be able to push in, if that's what your teacher's doing, to also push into that virtual classroom and be a part of this little mini lesson and meeting and help facilitate, just like you would as if you were to push into a classroom, in the school.
And one of the things that I've also I've done actually is, since asking, when we come back to the point of speaking to parents and finding out what they're already doing and what they've been, what their children have been doing, how they've been spending their time, to encourage FaceTime play dates. I know a lot of children that have been doing that and have been hearing some very funny stories about the conversations that have been ensuing. But to, focus, so keeping in mind what that goal is, and then talking to the parent and saying, hey, so this is really what we've been targeting, and kind of nudging into the conversation and seeing what you're hearing and what you're picking up from their conversation, so that when you do connect with the parent, they can report back on what they've been observing.
That's good. Let's see, just trying to look here at other questions.
Somebody asked a question about progress monitoring or data collection. I actually use the same data sheets I did when I was face-to-face, because to me, I'm still doing the exact same things. I'm still working on the same skills. And I always documented live, just with my chicken scratch notes. They're not formal, nobody else sees them, but it's kind of a way for me to keep track of how they're doing, maybe what I want to probe next, what, where to go from here, and to remind me, how they did. So you can still use, the paper and pencil tracking, and then put it in the computer under whatever billing system you use. Also, there's a lot of, I'm taking advantage of my district's apps that they have. I call them apps. I don't know what they're really called, like programs, Brain Pop, Seesaw, all these different things that you can assign students materials to do at home even, and then they turn them back into you, and they're graded. They're monitor, they are tracking the progress. So that kind of gives you an idea. But I mean, when they do them at home, do you know if they're actually, how much help they're getting? So it's not so much something that you can use for IEPs, but as far as live goes, I would just track them the same way that you always did.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has any.
No, I think that's
and now it's easier because you don't have to sneakily hide your sheet anywhere. So
that's good. I wanted to mention something really quickly because I've not seen as many conversations, but or questions that are coming up. But just somebody asked me yesterday, and I thought it was a great way to kind of focus things, was how do I get started? I have all of this information. What do you think is the very first thing I should do? And I was like, oh, that's great, to help organize it and kind of pare it down. And I think one thing is, to really just figure out, we need to know more about the classroom. We need to know more about what the teacher is doing, and you need to know more about what's going on with the family. All of those things, that is your new classroom. And just as any other service provider, OT speech, we know when we walk into our school site, we're looking at a classroom and we can see and we can ask the teacher and get that information, and we go from there. You just have to think that now this is it's all the same school, but it's just a different classroom that we're in. And so I think it's really hard to come up with treatment interventions or know what we're doing to help kids if we don't know what's happening there. So be patient with yourself and figure that out. What supplies do they have? Do they just have, paper, or do they have scissors, or do they have, we can't just be throwing out, activities. I mean, it might be obviously okay now. Yes, we're just trying to do what we can to get by. But as we move forward with this, we really need to make sure we're individualizing things for kids. And by individualizing, we need to know what's in that classroom so that we know what they can participate in. Because if you're giving them as OTs, if you're giving them a cutting activity and the parent doesn't have access to scissors at home, well, then that's not happening, right? So what else can we do? So you don't want to have to go backwards, make use of your time now, gather that information, and then you can it'll help you better guide and kind of give you a good foundation where to start, kind of moving forward. So.
Okay, well, that takes us to our hour. Thank you so much for the discussion and the questions, and I will go back through and make sure that we have answered everyone's questions, and apologize if we skipped you live, but we'll try to follow up with you. And I did just want to thank you again for joining us. I know it's just a crazy time, but look for additional opportunities coming up that we'll be offering, whether it's additional resources or possibly even another Q&A in the future. But in the meantime, please just stay in touch. You are not alone. We are here to support you. We've got your regular clinical manager that you've been assigned. We have your teletherapy task team that I referenced, and I did just want to mention another email address you can use if you're not sure who to reach out to. Please use the clinical help at telepractice-ssg.com email address. I'll add it to this packet once we get it on Bridge Academy, just so you have it. And just give us a couple of days to get this recording edited a bit, and then we'll upload it up to Bridge. We'll have the slides available you can download for future reference. So just give us a couple of days to get that done, and otherwise have a great day. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Guys, thank you.
Okay, are we clear?
Should I stop?